These pieces are the centre of the exhibition, and they're a collection of what I kind of think of as contemporary dioramas. They've got these wonderful dioramas in the National Museum of Wales that have very realistic plants. I'm thinking of dioramas where you have a stuffed animal and they're in a scene, and some of those elements are dried, but some of them are as if the plant is alive. So I kind of, in the museum, I went to ask and inquire what was, how come these plants look so real? And they told me that it was this technique of making wax modelling of plants. So you can reconstruct the plant as if it's real, as if it's living, and then that makes the dioramas look more realistic. And I became really interested in the idea of making these, learning how to make these models and making my own dioramas. But I felt like I wanted to make more contemporary dioramas that were more complex, to reflect the way that, in a way, all of us, organisms, plants, animals, humans, have less of a sort of simple, secluded life and more of a complicated life that's affected by global or globalisation or global actions and energies. This piece, 4 Seminal Moments, Raspberries, it is a seminal moment for me because it's almost an understanding of the relationship between energy, as in ecology, and energy as in entropy. All living structures use energy to create these wonderful shapes that we live around and in many ways take for granted. And when you make a model of something like a raspberry, you realise how amazing those structures are, because to make that wonderful plant out of wire and beeswax and silk, which is how you make the Victorian plant models that I've used, it's quite an engineering challenge. And making those tiny little capsules, the little baubles of the raspberries, they were circular when I put them together, but as I pushed them together, they turned into these little hexagons, which is nature's way of using space in the most economical way. So it was almost like through making them, I began to understand how nature works and how nature uses energy to create all these elaborate structures of life. When I had the idea of making work to do with plants, I first thought that I might make film or video about maybe picking plants or being around plants, but I realised that wouldn't give me the sort of close interaction that I wanted. It would make me feel sort of detached from the plants and that the screen was between me and the plants, whereas the actual action of making them has made me feel really connected to the plants and to that slow time culture I'm kind of quite interested in exploring. As well as being interested in energy, I'm also quite interested in cultural identity and how, in many ways, increasingly we all have quite hybridised cultural identities. So I wanted to look at maybe where my own cultural identity was what you might call indigenous, and sort of where I've lost part of that, and use video and this voicing of language to try to explore that cultural identity and loss of that identity. So in the video I voice Gaelic and Welsh, neither of which I speak, but they're both in my cultural identity. I've got a Gaelic name and I've got a Welsh speaking mum. And I took my family up to this remote part of northwest Scotland, a little bit of a pilgrimage where we used to go on family holidays. And this was where my Welsh speaking, but originally Gaelic speaking great-grandfather came from, up in northwest Scotland.
A boch.
A foc.
Na talaving.
Na talaving.
A nuan.
A nwan.
An loi.
An loi.
A bo.
A ddo.
A yenif kiche.
A yenef kiche.
A yenif a hanig on hich.
A yenef a hanig on hich.
An lásin.
An lásin.
Na slóis.
Na slóich.
In sin na farake.
In siad na sparage.
Skapte.
Skapta.
Skuri.
Skuri.
In Yarnagat.
And I called the piece Route to the Site because it was a quote from a text from the artist Robert Smithson, which talks a bit about if you go on a highway, it's almost a bit abstract, you don't take anything in, but if you go on a trail, you start to really experience the site. And I felt like not only I wanted to put the action of walking along this rocky path with language, because I feel like when you don't know a language, stumbling over the words, you embody it in a way that you can't do otherwise. So I listened to a Gaelic-speaking man and my Welsh-speaking mum speak these particular words from the Bible that have historical relevance to the places and to the loss of the languages. And then I just copied them, stumbling over the words in my own fashion, trying to repeat the words.
Energia.
Clown.
Clown.
Na farake.
Na farage.
Hyn,
Hyn.
lle,
Lle.
llawen,
Llawen.
difa,
Difa.
ni wyddan ddim,
Ni wyddan ddim.
llawer iawn.
Llawer iawn.